we're reaching corporate FOMO, we're going to get nation state FOMO, and then retail FOMO. And all of that's going to mean a very steep adoption curve. I think right now America should buy Bitcoin because it's almost on sale. Like anything under 0.5 million a coin, I would say is a good deal. I think we hit hyper-Bitcoinization somewhere at 0.5 million a coin, and we start devaluing gold and or demonetizing gold and real estate, which are both massive chunks of the global wealth. And Bitcoin goes up very quickly to 1 million, 2, 3. And at that point, nobody will take dollars for payment. So you won't be able to buy a TV or a car with fiat money. They'll say, oh, we want Bitcoin. And what it looks like for the average person is that they'll just be paid in sats. So you'll be earning, 20 sats an hour for minimum wage or something like that.
At its price right now, Bitcoin is still a bargain. But once it breaks $500,000, which is happening soon, everything snaps into motion. Fiat collapses, institutional demand explodes, and the world begins pricing everything in sats. That's the latest message from Yan3 CEO Samson Mouw. Mouw believes that right now, Bitcoin is still on sale. Anything under $500,000 per coin is a rare opportunity. But once hyper-Bitcoinization begins, which he estimates is likely around that threshold, everything changes. Gold and real estate start to lose their monetary premium. Fiat demand crumbles, and suddenly everyone wants Bitcoin. Under hyper-Bitcoinization, fiat begins to lose utility. Vendors stop accepting dollars. Payments shift entirely to Bitcoin, and wages are denominated in saties. The global economy realigns around a new standard, one that no longer relies on fiat money. Make sure to stick around until the end of the video, as Samson Mouw explains why hyper-Bitcoinization is no longer a theory, and why Bitcoin crossing $500,000 could mark the end of fiat as we know it.
I'm just in disbelief that we're still at these prices now, given the amount of just incredible accumulation from all the corporate Bitcoin treasury companies, as well as the telegraphing of plans from nation states to buy. So, if I was the US, I would buy now, especially given the big, beautiful bill passing, and that's just going to increase the debt and deficit. It's never easy to talk to governments about Bitcoin. So I guess your question earlier was, what's the general state of things? And I would say the general state is very encouraging and optimistic. But as always, it's challenging to get nation-state Bitcoin adoption. Most countries are very democratic in nature, whereby there's a good separation of power. No one party has control over the legislature or Senate, and you have to kind of get buy-in from all the different groups. And of course, there are different groups within every government vying for power, influence, and control. So at any given time, you're fighting against this natural inertia. But at the same time, all the governments are always dealing with some crisis in some form or fashion, either of their own making or from some externality. So it's very difficult, I think, to get governments to come on board. And we've kind of seen that in our efforts over the past few years at Jan3. We get meetings, but the meetings, albeit encouraging, are usually just a step in the right direction, but without any concrete action. And I think it's to do with those reasons outlined before. And that's kind of shifted our strategy a bit lately. So we've tried to take a different approach of actually doing things with governments instead of proposing things and hoping that they will follow through on their own. So we're proposing things like creating sandboxes to facilitate Bitcoin adoption in very small, specific, targeted regions. We started doing some groundwork for projects to start Bitcoin adoption, with maybe networks of ATMs or things in different countries too. So there's a lot of different things that we're trying differently now that are, I guess, supportive of the overall education and high-level engagement, but may lead to actual implementation of strategies faster than just pure engagement and discussion. Well, there's an aspirational goal and there's a realistic goal. I think the aspirational goal was 1 million with Cynthia Lummis's Bitcoin Act, right? And RFK had talked about acquiring 2 million Bitcoin. But I think a more pragmatic goal would be something along the lines of MicroStrategy or Strategy 600,000 coins. I think that is still doable if implemented within the next year, so the next 12 months or so. Anything outside of that, your chances of accumulating hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin are rapidly dwindling. But again, circling back to the other point we made, like we're still waiting to hear exactly how much Bitcoin the US has right now, because we don't even have that clear picture. And I believe a good chunk of the 200 some odd thousand coins purported to be in the US Strategic Bitcoin Reserve actually belong to Bitfinex. So if that is the case, the US could have far less than 100,000 coins. The biggest challenge, I think, is the governments are always distracted by something else. If the US was focused on executing on their Bitcoin strategy, I think they could have probably had something out the door already. But, the shift focused to the one big beautiful bill and other things. And I think these will have repercussions on the ability for the US to accumulate a significant sized reserve. It's the incentive structure, right? If your organization exists to lend money, well, what happens when there's no one left to lend money to? You lose your job. And this is why countries keep electing socialist governments into power, because they keep on giving people free things. So they keep getting voted into power. But it's kind of the same thing on a more supranational scale with the IMF. So I don't think that it's in their interests as people working for this organization, or even the organization itself, that countries do move into implementing a Bitcoin strategy and stepping on their way to a path to repay the IMF. But overall, I think right now we're at a bigger crossroads, which is Bitcoin just an asset for Bitcoin treasury companies, or is it money for the world? And is it something people spend? And even within Bitcoiner circles, there's sort of a heated discussion where people are saying you should never spend your Bitcoin, and the other faction is saying you have to spend it and you should spend and replace, because that's how people get Bitcoin. If you don't spend your Bitcoin, no one will accept it and adopt it and learn about it. Well, I think Bitcoin is both, and you have to be okay with people treating it as an asset. So there's no real direct parallel to this. If you look at gold, people were spending gold in history. They would spend it as gold coins and buy shoes with it or bread with it, or like lower derivatives of gold like silver and copper, right? But the main point is you would transact it and spend it, but at the same time, people do hoard it as well. And I think the difference is a bit more pronounced with Bitcoin, because it's underpinning much of the financial system now, because it has to. Institutions, governments, corporations, they're all looking for a pristine asset that's not going to degrade and devalue over time. So that's why companies like Strategy and others are adding it to their balance sheet, and governments too. But at the same time, you have the rest of the world, which needs money. They need liquid money that can be spent to pay their suppliers, to pay vendors, to move around quickly, in addition to stablecoins too. But they're looking for something to use as money. So both sides are actively pushing both use cases, the medium of exchange and the store of value use case. So I think you'll see it end equilibrium where it does turn out to be both, and it is really good at being both things, and it's not necessarily one or the other. And even if BlackRock and Strategy and others have a large holding of Bitcoin, you're always going to have Bitcoin in the wild and being used by ordinary people to spend and use in their daily life. In the developing world, you're going to see people, storing it on their phone and hopefully on a hardware wallet, but using it more as a bearer asset and a cash instrument.
Samson Mouw believes Bitcoin is still massively underpriced, especially considering the scale of global accumulation already underway. Corporate treasuries are locking in long-term positions, and behind closed doors, nation-states are preparing to do the same. Although the US continues to delay concrete action, distracted by debt expansion and political gridlock, other countries aren't waiting. According to Mouw, the window to accumulate meaningful reserves is closing fast. The price may still look accessible now, but that won't last. When the next wave hits, Bitcoin will reprice entirely.
I think the rapid repricing is just waiting right now to happen. You have the ETFs, which eliminate all the barriers to Bitcoin acquisition. In previous cycles, you always had a bottleneck with exchanges onboarding people and companies, right? They would just get bottlenecked for months. But with the ETFs, that bottleneck is gone. It's just money will flow in anytime. It's like a portal to TradFi money. And then you have the demand from all the corporations. You have nation states starting to line up and go through their own processes to allow for accumulation. So all of that combined with the current financial system and all of the money printing from past decades, more pertinently probably from the last 5 years, is all coming to a head. So even without the big beautiful bill, Bitcoin will explode to the upside. But the big beautiful bill just guarantees it, in fact. So nothing really stops the train, in the words of Lynn Alden. So yeah, I think the big beautiful bill should open some more eyes and accelerate the takeoff or the liftoff of the Bitcoin rocket. Because if you look at what Ray Dalio is posting, 7 trillion a year translates to about 64 million BTC. So 3-ish Bitcoin networks are going to be spent per year. So you can kind of figure out and reason out that Bitcoin is cheap right now. The question is, how fast can governments move? And the answer is not that fast. So even if you look at cities, the speed at which a city can adopt a Bitcoin treasury is slow too. The city of Vancouver is looking towards that. The Mayor Ken Sim has been pushing for the city to adopt, but it'll take maybe another 8 to 12 months of research, presentations to the board, and then possibly passing some bylaws or whatnot to allow them to have Bitcoin in a treasury. And this is a lot of red tape to cross. And it's the same for countries, if not worse. I think we hit hyper-Bitcoinization somewhere at 0.5 million a coin, and we start devaluing gold or demonetizing gold and real estate, which are both massive chunks of the global wealth. And Bitcoin goes up very quickly to 1 million, 2, 3, and at that point, nobody will take dollars for payment. So you won't be able to buy a TV or a car with fiat money. They'll say, "But we want Bitcoin." And what it looks like for the average person is that they'll just be paid in sats. So you'll be earning 20 sats an hour for minimum wage or something like that. You just have more and more companies saying we're buying Bitcoin, and you don't really know if they understand Bitcoin, right? They may just be following a trend. And you can see the degeneration of that trend too with things like Solana and Ripple treasury companies now too. That's not going to end well, guaranteed. But my concern is a lot of these companies with people you never know of just saying we're buying Bitcoin. If they don't understand what it is they bought and why Bitcoin is valuable, they're probably going to fold. Or they haven't spent the effort to convince their board to get on board, no pun intended. And they might get pressure from their board to sell when the price goes down a bit. I know one of the big things Michael Saylor did was he spent time educating the strategy board on Bitcoin. So even when there was a downturn, we had a bear market and we went down to 16K. Strategy was holding through that. So they're able to withstand it because they understood, and Michael understood it, of course. And I think that is something that we have not seen with a lot of the copycats just yet. The shifts that we've seen in corporate adoption and the traditional market. So Bitcoin is now far more accessible in traditional stocks, and they have a large lead on tokenized stocks because they're getting easier and easier to trade. The windows of trading times are increasing, and a lot of the more traditional exchanges are looking at ways to tokenize so that they can get fully 24/7 and potentially bearer trading, which I think was the promise of securities, tokenized securities. But yeah, it's interesting to see the route that things have gone. I think Bitfinex Securities has played a large role in driving the tokenized securities narrative, and most of their offerings are on the Liquid network. And in fact, I think almost all of them are. But I believe we're lacking some larger issuances that can drive more attention, because it's like tokenized securities are the worst of both worlds. You have to deal with the bearer aspect of it, and you have less liquidity than the traditional market. So there has to be some big draw to it. And originally I was thinking Bitcoin bonds issued by sovereign states could be a big driver, because you'll have a large pool of liquidity if there's a number of bonds issued, like billions of dollars of liquidity, and interest because it is Bitcoin backed. So basically Bitcoin bonds could have been like strategy if they were executed on in 2022 or 2023. But I think that ship has sailed, and a lot of the interest now has shifted over to strategy and its preferred stock offering. So the market for tokenized securities has changed a lot. And then, like you mentioned, you have Robinhood, and they're trying things on Solana and everything like that. But you can see the same thing. They're looking for stocks that people want exposure to, like OpenAI and SpaceX. But I think the key is to find a draw. But I'm still bullish on Liquid for tokenized securities. And I think one thing that could be interesting is tokenization of all the Bitcoin treasury companies, which has already happened. So there's CMSTR, and there is, I think, tokenized H100 as well. I'm not sure about AltBG, but Stoker, which is a Liquid member, they've been working with a large number of companies to tokenize these. So if there is enough demand for exposure to these tokenized stocks, then I think a marketplace like Bitfinex Securities or others could come up and allow for trading of those. So you might see it blow up in the future.
So there's Samson Mouw with his latest outlook on Bitcoin. He warns that even proof of reserves isn't enough if you can't see the whole picture. Some firms may claim their Bitcoin is held with custodians like Coinbase, but that doesn't rule out rehypothecation or hidden claims. Unless every investor verifies holdings, double counting remains a real risk. Mouw also acknowledges strategy's strength. The company has held firm through major market downturns because its leadership understands Bitcoin's long-term value. That kind of conviction doesn't exist in most companies jumping into Bitcoin just to follow the trend. On the tokenization front, Moore remains bullish on the Liquid network and platforms like Bitfinex Securities, which enable the trading of tokenized stocks and Bitcoin-backed securities. Still, he admits the space hasn't hit critical momentum, mostly because these products lack liquidity and broad appeal compared to traditional markets. The key to success, he says, will be pairing tokenized assets with real-world demand and quality underlying value. Until that happens, his focus stays on what's proven: conviction, transparency, and Bitcoin itself. Anyway, guys, if you want to stay most up-to-date on the crypto and Bitcoin world, subscribe to my daily 5-minute crypto newsletter. It's a concise resource for the latest expert predictions, breaking news, and top on-chain analysis trusted by over 90,000 subscribers for insightful crypto investment information. Don't miss out on the opportunity to stay informed in the crypto market. The link is in the description below. I hope you all enjoyed today's video and that it gave you some value. I'll see you all at the next one, and as always, all the best.